Okay, well, good morning, everybody, and welcome to this Road Safety GB webinar. It's a pleasure to have so many of you here for this 45-minute session looking at the assessment of walk routes to school guidelines. I'm just going to run through how the session is going to pan out. We have a 30-minute presentation, which is split into three parts. The first part will be delivered by James Gibson, who will provide an overview of the latest updates to the guidelines, which have been introduced to improve consistency and aid clarity within the document. We will then hand over to Rob and Joe from Dorset Council, who will sort of have a look at the benefits of reviewing kind of historic walk-to-route assessment decisions and provide a sort of an example of some work that they've been doing. And finally, we're joined by TMS Consultancy, who will be providing an outline of their Walk Routes to School training course, which will also incorporate further detail on risk assessment methodology, and its practical application to walk routes. So which is really exciting because it's great to have so many of you here. We actually had 250 people sign up, which is extraordinary, and I can see more than 200 of you are already in the lobby. So yeah, we're looking forward to a great session. I'm just going to quickly, before I hand it to James, just explain that. I say we will have time for Q&A at the end. You can do so using the Q&A function or the chat function at the top or bottom of your screen, depending how your browser is set up. If I could ask you kindly to kind of, if you have a question aimed at a specific panelist, please put their name in the question to kind of help us kind of direct those in the right direction. And just finally, for me, before we start, we are recording this session, so if you do want to catch up at any point, you can do so. We will kind of distribute the link afterwards. And likewise, please feel free to send to any colleagues. Awesome. I think that's all from me for now. So without further ado, I'm going to hand over to James Gibson.
Fantastic. Thanks, Ed, and a very good morning to everybody. And thank you to the colleagues on the call, to Rob and Joe and Steve and Jess. So Ed's kind of outlined what we're going to cover today. We've got three 10-minute blocks. So what I thought I would do, and I wanted to just run over this because we've got quite a wide audience here. I want to just give a very brief introduction to Road Safety GB. Before then, I move on to talking about the recent guidelines updates. And then we'll hear from Rob and Joe about the work that they've been doing in Dorset. And that I found that really interesting to hear from the work that's going on there. And then, of course, we'll move to Jess and Steve and find out about the training course that they offer, and then move on to our Q&A. So let's start then. Just guide you through some information about Road Safety GB. So some of you will know this, but we're a membership organisation. We're split into 12 regions. We have lots of local authorities that are members, but also road safety partnerships, police, fire, and corporate members as well. For anybody that is a corporate member, those that are looking for some extra marketing benefits, we run something called Corporate Plus membership, where we cater for that. We class Department for Transport and the road safety brand Think as strategic partners of Road Safety GB. So I'll just move on, Ed, to the next slide. When you first log on and you do it, say you do a search for Road Safety GB, you'll think that this is a news-based website, which is exactly what it is. Every day we're running news stories. Ed is our editor of the news feed. There's two grey buttons there on the right-hand side, and there's a couple of things that you can do. There's no cost to this. You can submit news stories to us, and you can also subscribe. So we have around 2,500 road safety professionals that subscribe, and they get news alerts. And the key thing they get is on a Monday, they get a summary of last week's news. So it can be really helpful if you're particularly interested in a particular subject area, to glance down the news stories that have happened across the past week and then click on that. Okay, Ed, we'll move on. The training arm of Road Safety GB is called the Road Safety GB Academy. And we run a suite of courses. Things like the Practitioner Foundation course is really popular. That's perfect for people that are new into road safety. Behavioural change courses, we run a specific one for highway engineers. And you'll see on the right-hand side, the walked routes to school. So we've got this collaboration here with TMS. So if you visit the Academy website, that's on the top right-hand page. And we'll find out more about that course as we go through. But I just wanted to explain there's a suite of courses there. And, I obviously want more people to come and use those. Okay, Ed, we'll move on. I'll mention the Knowledge Centre. So think of this as a web-based library of road safety information. It's free to access. It gets updated every week. And again, you can subscribe so you receive an email about the latest information that's been published. And it's searchable, so you can search by categories and by themes. And it's a great bank of information that's there and say free for people to use. And we also run a help forum on the Knowledge Centre. So again, kind of like a peer-to-peer help forum. So that's very popular. And if you don't know about that, then again, that's something new for today. Ed, I'll move on, please. The other thing that Road Safety GB does is to run events. Our big conference is the National Road Safety Conference, and we move this around the country. We were in Bedfordshire last year in November. It's the 24th, 25th of November this year. We're taking the conference to Leeds, to the Queen's Hotel. We run an exhibition that runs alongside, typically 35 to 40 stands. The refreshments are served where the exhibition is. And the main room, we can seat about 400 people. So the conference has grown. It's grown in size and scale. I think with lots of things happening online, it does give people that opportunity to meet face to face, and it's proving to be very popular. So yeah, please bear that in mind. Next slide. So this event, I'll just mention, it's happening in a couple of weeks' time. Sorry, a couple of months' time. A mature drivers conference. So this one is in Birmingham. It's slightly smaller, about 150 delegates for this one. But if you have an interest in mature drivers, then please bear this in mind. You can get links from the website. We are very lucky to be supported. We've got 3 supporters for the Mature Drivers Conference. We've got GEM Motoring Assist, the Road Safety Trust, and also Waymo. And I'm very interested with Waymo and the autonomous vehicle side. In terms of mature drivers, what can that do? How can that help mature drivers as they move forward? Okay, Ed, next slide. I've put a slide in here with the links. So again, you're free to look back at that through the video, and say the links to those 4 websites are there, and also a link to our membership. Okay, so thanks, Ed. Next slide. Thank you very much for listening to that, and that obviously just gives that overview of Road Safety GB. But now let's move on to what we're here to talk about today. So assessment of walked routes to school, the guidelines. So they're available from our website, and you can access those. We have a resources and services section, and there's a section that is headed Road Safety GB, and you can download the guidelines from there. Next slide. I want to just set out some background just to give us some context, really. So the guidelines exist to help officers carry out assessments where a journey is below the statutory distance. The assessments are normally required where it's claimed that the route is not safe, and therefore a local authority should provide free transport. Now, Road Safety GB have been involved with the guidelines for a long time. They were originally published back in 2012 in this format, and most recently they were updated at the end of 2025. A small working group was formed to review the document, and we've got Steve and Rob and Joe here today, and other colleagues were involved as well. Next slide, Ed. Now, I want to just reinforce a really important note for me, and it sounds obvious, but the guidelines provide guidance. That's what they do. And it's for individual local authorities to determine the provision of free school transport through their own policies and individual assessments. What local authorities should also do is take into consideration the government statutory guidance on home to school travel, plus any other policies and legislation that is in place. I also want to note that in Wales, additional specific guidance exists. So, for example, the learner travel statutory provision and operational guidance. And what we have in our guidelines, the Road Safety GB guidelines, there's a specific reference to the Learner Travel Wales measure 2008. So the key takeaway from that slide is that the guidelines are guidance, and it's for that individual local authority to interpret those. So next slide, Ed. I've got 3 slides here which summarize the key changes to the document. So there could well be many of you on the call that are very familiar with the guidelines. And I'd start by saying the changes that we've made as a working group, they are relatively small. But the important bit is that we hope that it will improve consistency and aid clarity through the document. We have the new contacts for the working group added into the document, and also they're listed in a section on the Road Safety GB website. It's headed Help and Advice. So contacts for the working group are listed there with emails. So again, people are quite happy to be approached after this meeting and, and do some follow-up. The next bullet points, the ones with the red text in. So I just wanted to make it really clear what we've done. So references to accident, we've changed to collision. Where we've got references to unsafe, we've changed to unavailable. References to non-hazardous, we changed to available. And any references to hazardous, we changed to not available. So you can see there's a bit of a pattern happening here. The document also used to use the word adequate, and we've changed that to available. And within it, sometimes there was the word acceptable, and we've changed that to available. So quite subtle, but there is a point to doing that, and hopefully it will improve consistency throughout the document. Let's have a look at the next slide, changes on slide 2. So there's a section in the guidance about traffic flow, and that's been simplified. We had some references regarding traffic flow, and the words light and very light were used, and that didn't match. That didn't match to information that was within tables. So now, for consistency, it is low, medium, and heavy. We've added a note about platoons, so where traffic bunches together. And there's a note in there about using professional judgment and about the gaps between platoons of traffic. And then some work that Steve was particularly involved in on public rights of way, and we've added a section in here, and I know Rob and Joe might touch on this as well, but we've added a section. It's certainly all about professional judgment, but there is information about surface condition, water and flooding, and also the frequency of that. Foliage, either blocking a route or narrowing a route. If there is livestock in a field, again, there's some text about the frequency of the livestock and also the space that the livestock are in. And there's a note as well about minor improvements, how cost effective that can be. So, for example, unblocking a route or clearing a route that was narrowed can be very cost effective for local authorities. Okay, I'm on to my last slide, slide 3 for the changes. So we've included some details for trailways. We've added a note about stopping distances, and what this has now is a reference to manual for streets and design manual for roads and bridges. What we're saying is they need to be considered by the local authority. Gap time, we've added a reference to the traffic signs manual chapter 6. And then there is text in the guidance about the benefits of reviewing existing and historic assessment decisions, and also the importance of working, I suppose you'd describe it as holistically, looking at how you can work with wider teams. And I know Joe and Rob are going to talk more about this. And then my final point is there have been no changes or additions to section 3, and that's the case law appendices. So no changes at all there. That remains as it was. Okay, so that covers my slides. I'm going to hand over to Rob and Joe.
Thank you, James. Thank you very much. My name is Rob Camp, Road Safety Officer for Dorset Council, and along my colleague Joe Allen, who will introduce himself in a minute. We're really excited to be here today, to be honest. We've been reviewing some of our historic walk routes, probably now for about 18 months. And we'd just like to share with you that project and how that project's evolved. Ed, if we could go to the next slide. So just a quick little background, and I'm sure some of you will be familiar with the roles of your respective members in walk route assessments. I've been doing this probably now for 15 years. And when I first got involved, my role was just to provide some evidence and photos, videos for panel meetings where members would decide, as we used to use the terms in those days, safe or unsafe. And the members would make those decisions. The officer's role was literally just a supportive role in evidence one. So we've managed over a period of time to embed the national guidelines into our processes, which is, we're quite passionate about it. I also get involved with school crossing patrols. So we also have those national guidelines, and they give you a framework and consistency which you can work with. So our school transport team have embedded that policy of national guidelines in their policies so that we use them when we go to panel. When did we start reviewing routes and why? Well, Joe's going to explain that in very good detail in a minute, but if I'm honest, it was quite by chance. Joe and I do not work for school admissions, and we do not work for school transport. We just provide a service for them. And in doing that, we've never been asked to review or look at anything we've ever done in the past, which when you look back at it now, seems quite odd. So I think it'd be a good time now for Joe to sort of come in and give you all the details of an example of a project and how that has expanded.
Thank you, Rob. We can go to the thanks, Ed. So my name is Joe Allen. I work with Rob in Road Safety, but I also manage our traffic survey team, which is why Rob and I ended up working quite closely together on a number of road safety projects and speed limit changes, the SID speed indicator device project, things like that, providing that survey aspect. And this is why I got involved with the walk routes some time ago as well. So this whole project for us of reviewing started out from a chance visit. So Rob and I were heading up to North Dorset. There's two pictures on your screen there. The left-hand picture, we're coming down the A354 into Blandford, and it used to look like it did on the left there. And when we did a walk route assessment from a small village called Charlton Marshall up to Blandford, that route historically was deemed to be an unavailable route because of this point. It was the gap analysis, peak times, trying to cross the bypass was deemed to be an unsafe position, so we deemed it an unavailable route. Well, on this particular day, we drove through, and as a result of the development that's been built there, the developers provided this amazing staggered crossroads, signalised, perfectly safe, adequate crossing, really good facility. And Rob and I were in the van having a chat and said, oh, hang on a minute, this is the reason that we've deemed this route unavailable. This could be available again. We could go back and re-review this. So we did. And if you take us on to the next slide, please, Ed. So we got our national guidelines. We had a discussion with the teams involved, the transport team, school transport team, and the admissions team, and said, you know, oh, should we do this? And they was, yeah, absolutely. So we headed out to Charlton Marshall. Initially, we walked up the road, and there's a couple of spaces where it's a little bit narrow, and we maybe got some hedges cut, but it would have been fine. But we sort of stumbled over this trailway. And North Dorset's very lucky. They've got an amazing trailway. It goes all over North Dorset. It's compacted stone, a lot of it's old railway line, really fantastic facility. And we walked all the way along here and it was like, wow, this is amazing. This is providing a really, really good route to be available. So we walked the route, we measured it, and it was under the statutory distance. Unfortunately, the system that our admissions team use for the school admissions is a system called Synergy, and that solely works on that statutory distance. But we're finding that the trailway and a lot of the rights of way that we want to use aren't on there. So we're having to manage this system outside and manually provide distances and maps to go along that. We are working with Synergy. We've put some things forward to try and hopefully get more of these rights of ways. I mean, they're on GIS layers that we hold, so we're hoping that we can eventually get to a point where these are on there. But our other problem was, historically, like Rob says, that some of those decisions that were made to not make rights of way available because there was a different mindset about them was they're closed on the system. So an officer who's worked in admissions would go in, someone's asked for school transport, they'd look at the statutory distance. Well, because of particular routes closed, it would go a longer way around, and they would say they were entitled. Even though when Rob and I would look at it, we'd say, well, no, there's a perfectly available route here. So that's something that's been happening for us. So when we assessed this one, we did the route, we did the assessment, everything was fine, and we notified parents through the admissions team that school transport was to be removed. There was obviously an appeal, and that went to a panel, and we had to give evidence at that panel, and so did some parents. But ultimately, because we'd followed national guidelines, and our home to school policy is we work to these guidelines, it was found to be that there was an available route and that school transport was removed. Now, although financially this is not our driving force, Rob and I will not consider the money. We want fair and consistent analysis for each and every one that applies. There is this byproduct of what we've done is this one route alone saved between 50 and 60,000 pounds a year. These is huge amounts of money on school transport that I'm sure every authority has the same issues with. And we've since then done 4, 5, 6 other routes where not necessarily quite as much as 50 or 60, but maybe 30 or 40,000 pounds. And we found more of these routes we've analysed, looked at, and found the same situation. So ensuring that fairness and consistency, that one parent's not getting school transport when another one is, just because we haven't gone back and reviewed some of these infrastructure improvements and changes that have happened on the network as well. Ed, could we go to the next slide, please? So how do we do this and where do we go? Well, one of the first things that we did was set up the Walk Route Assessment Project Working Group with a number of colleagues from across the authority. It includes the road safety team, which is Rob and I in highways, some of our highways design colleagues, the countryside team. Now, the countryside team have been really, really key in this for us. They've done so many things for us to help, whether that be a bit of clearance on a path, hedge cutting, a bit of improvements. We actually walked a route yesterday. It was 1.8 miles. Went for an ancient woodland. It was absolutely lovely, amazing. There was one bit where we sort of highlighted some what they call green laners, and their 4x4s had damaged a fence and tried to get through, and they're going to get that tidied up and cleared up for us and repair that, so and make it so that's put some rocks there so they can't do that again. So working with them has been a really fantastic achievement for us to get us all together. Our LTP projects team, local transport plan, they've been really helpful as well. Again, having them involved for that funding towards it, and how they can bring in funding for active travel, walking and wheeling projects has been really good. Obviously, the school transport team and the admissions team as well, because they're managing the budgets and they're in control of notifying parents and being part of that process. So where do we go from here and what are we doing? Well, we're now still reviewing, obviously, new applicants as they come in and people apply either through our website or that. But we're also looking at some of the things on Synergy when they say they're over distance, just to be sure that that's correct. At the moment, we've got this little bit of an issue where some routes are closed and we can't see and things like that. So we're just making sure that we're looking at that where we can. Then looking at some of the historic taxi and bus contracts and whereabouts we might be able to have a look at those, because there's been some infrastructure changes, and ensure that we're still needing to provide that service. Obviously, the rights of way and what we talked about earlier on rights of way and how we've changed our mindset. I mean, it's important to remember we are in rural Dorset. You might have to put a pair of boots on to walk to school. It might be a thing that you have to do. We live in a rural area, and that is the infrastructure of our area. So, there might be times where we say to someone, this is an available route, but there might be a time of the year in the winter where you do have to put on a pair of boots to do it. And we're happy with that's comfortable for us. But that's where your professional judgment comes in. And when we look at these rights of ways and say, is this sensible or is it not? I mean, Rob and I walked one before where we walked down there and said, absolutely not. That is not a reasonable request. So, you do have to make that judgment when looking at them. And then again, reviewing with our other teams in the LTP team of infrastructure they're doing in highways improvements and things like that to make sure we're aware of what's going on and how that might impact on the transport provision. But also new developments, when those new planning applications come in, is ensuring that we're getting involved at an early stage. So we're not in a situation where a new development's built and suddenly they're all entitled to school transport because we didn't consider putting a ped refuge in, or getting the developer to put a crossing in, or providing something that would help. At the stage I've mentioned Charminster Farm. The reason I'm saying that is this is quite a reasonable sized development, and the route that would have been mapped would be the exit to the estate on the highway. Now that would have entitled the whole development to school transport. But what we actually did is we were very lucky because we got in there late stage with that developer. We literally put in 5 meters of footpath through a hedge, and they linked it up with the existing pavement. It was literally only 5 meters, and now that whole estate would now be under distance. So, that's really important for us that we're involved in those sorts of things to make sure that, that could have been an awful lot of provision for school transport that was avoided at an early stage. And finally, here I've got an example for another little project we do with Litchett Minster. We had a lovely path that came down, it joined the carriageway, but the school was slightly further up. And there was a very short section of carriageway that Rob and I were not comfortable with saying was available. There was a few things, a bit of a blind corner, the step-offs weren't the best. So what we did was we looked at the LTP team and we got them involved in highways, and now we've got a short-term one-way system at school times, morning and afternoon, and also a painted on the carriageway virtual footway that links literally from the end of the path along the carriageway and up to the school with a crossing point in front of the school. Not an awful lot of money for what it was, paint on the road and a TRO for the restriction times, but a really positive thing. And I don't want to downplay that one, because although we can't show that as a saving because we weren't providing the school transport yet, it could have been hundreds of £1,000s. We were talking multiple coaches for that one. So it could have been literally hundreds of thousands of pounds if we'd have had to provide that school transport. So that was a really good project for us to get in early and understand what was happening there. So that's where we are now, and we continue to do that. Thank you.
Hi everybody. Thank you to Rob and Joe. I'm sure they've shared some really interesting insights and a really useful case study for many of you on the call. So I'm Jess. I'm one of the directors at TMS Consultancy, and I've also got Steve Proctor joining me this morning, and in a few moments he's going to take you through some of the more technical detail that we cover in our Walked Routes to School training course that you might be interested in joining if you would like to know more about this topic. So first of all, I'm just going to sort of explain. So one of the services that we offer is road safety audits, and we typically work with local authorities, residential developers, or design consultancies when we're conducting road safety audits. And then the other part of what we offer is road safety engineering training with some of our courses, such as the 10-day road safety engineering course being assured by ROSPA, and our highway inspectors course being accredited by Lantra. We also run training courses on a lot of different topics. So you've got things like roundabout design, introduction to road safety audit or road safety audit awareness, and things such as development control as well. So you've got the link to our website if you'd like to kind of get in touch to know any more information about what we do. So if we can go on to the next slide, please, Ed. I just wanted to we've got Steve who's going to talk you through some of the content for Walked Routes to School in a moment. But what I wanted to sort of share with you as well is the rest of our training team. So we've got a core team of 4 trainers, and I guess what we feel is different about the training that we offer is that all of our team are practitioners first, each with at least sort of 20 years of hands-on experience. So we've got different sort of backgrounds across the team, but lots of them have worked either in local authority or in design teams themselves. And then we've also had members of the team who have come from sort of road safety, policing. So there's a really broad level of experience within the team. And I'm sure, like, some of you will have been on courses with them before, but they're all very well experienced in their areas of expertise. So I'm now going to pass you on to Steve Proctor, who's going to take you through some of the more technical detail on walked routes to school. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Jess, and good morning, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here. Thanks for the invitation. I'll be as brief as I can and just run through a few slides with you. The Walk Routes to School course sets out obviously the RSGB guidelines on this topic and tries to place them in the wider context of the risk assessment process. The course also includes an option there, the third bullet point. We can do a little bit on school crossing patrols as well. We can combine the two. But I just want to talk today very briefly about the Walk Routes to School aspects. If we can have the next slide, please, Ed. The course runs over 2 days. So the site visits and talking about the report writing templates is on the second day. And on the first day, we look in particular at a number of topics, including, and we feel this is very important on a course of this nature, understanding collisions. So looking at some examples of collisions and trying to ascertain within those examples, what is the road-based factor? What's the highway factor? If we can understand why road users fail to cope with road environments, then we've got a good chance when we're doing risk assessment and when we're using and applying the Walked Routes to School guidelines, we've got a good chance then of understanding some of the road safety risks that are apparent as we're doing our site work. So if I could have the next slide, please, Ed. Thank you very much. So I'm just going to show you a few slides from the course, and one of the important things obviously is the identification of available footways, defining a footway to include, as was mentioned earlier by James, in particular looking at public rights of way as well as roadside footpaths, if you like. And there is some discussion within the course of this issue now, the public rights to way issue, and the ways in which we need to look at surface conditions, standing water, as James mentioned before, and also thinking about things like livestock on the routes. And we've got some slides in the course there showing some information on that and how maybe you can assess that type of thing. Okay, next slide, please, Ed. We talk about traffic flow, and again, James mentioned the changes there to some of the wording. So trying to get an understanding of how we can measure traffic flow and how we can define it as either low or high or whatever term we want to use. And of course, the very important point about what is a step off, what is an available step off, and thinking about that not only in terms of on the day when we're doing the site visit, but also possibly at a different time of year. So that sort of thing about seasonal adjustments is part of it. Thanks, Ed. Next slide, please. We talk about crossings because quite clearly you might be walking alongside a road or on a footpath, but you might need to cross the road. So what is an available place to cross the road, and how do we assess that? Next slide, please. And we look at some of the technical input that you might need to do that with some relatively straightforward, but nevertheless empirical work where we're talking about things like crossing times and how to measure that. And on the next slide, please, Ed, we talk about gap time and what is a suitable gap time, how do we measure that? And of course, the relationship between an available gap time and visibility between pedestrians and drivers. Some of this is a little bit technical, but one of the things that we do is we've got a workshop on the first day to look at this, and on the second day when we go out on site, we can actually do some of these measurements and give learners the confidence that that you can go out and measure these things, and it helps with that professional judgment that we talked about and sets in context the procedures that are within the road safety guidelines, the Walk Routes to School guidelines. So yeah, the site visit part is very important because we'll take a real route and we'll walk that route and we'll ask the questions that need to be asked in relation to the advice in the guidelines. And if I could have my final slide, please, Ed, thank you very much. One of the things that we've sort of looked at over the years when delivering various versions of this course is how do you take the guidelines and then put them into a context that is a consistent and, if you like, and repeatable format? And so we do provide two templates on the course. One for on the left-hand side there, that's part of the template for doing the surveys, and you can just see there on that slide. There's a template for calculating gap time. Hopefully, that sort of thing is very self-explanatory, or certainly very usable once you've been through the course. And learners are very welcome to take that away and use it for their own authority. And then secondly, on the right-hand side, there's just a little bit there from a template that we've got that basically takes you through a report writing process. And of course, with a lot of these routes, they're split into sections. It's not just one route, it's maybe 4 sections. So the template takes you through each of those sections, asks the relevant questions that need to be asked, yes or no answers, and takes you to a decision point where you're asking, for example, is the footway deemed available? Is the crossing deemed available? Is the section deemed available? And gives you an opportunity to upload into that document photographs, maps, and so on and so forth. Okay, Jess, well, that's my bit done. And if you want to finish off with details.
Thanks, Steve. So yeah, I can see in the chat a couple of people had asked when the course would be running and if there would be any further courses. So the next course, which is a face-to-face course in Stratford-upon-Avon, is running at the end of April. It's a 2-day course, and we're offering a discount for Road Safety GB Academy members. So if you'd like any further information about this course, drop us an email at courses@tmsconsultancy.co.uk, or you can give us a call. If you want to book, just make sure you select the RSGB member if you are a member, and then we'll apply the discount to the course as well. But yes, I can see someone's asked a question about whether there's likely to be any more. I would say if you register your interest, then as courses are planned for the rest of the year, we'll reach out to you to let you know the next dates. Yeah, great. Thanks, everyone.
Excellent. Well, thank you, everybody, to my panelists. That was a great sort of series of presentations all into one. I'm pleased to say we now have about sort of 10 minutes for questions, and just while I bring up the chat in front of me, we'll see where we'll go with these questions. Okay, so I'm going to pick the first question, which asks, in my role as a road safety officer for Wiltshire Council, I carry out the walked route assessments on request from the school transport entitlement officer. Is this the same for other local authorities? Or do other non-road safety officers? We're also reviewing historical routes where free bus entitlement was given. I don't know if anyone wants to pick that one up for me, please.
I think it's going to be varied across the country, really. As you know, again, we know the makeup of different teams are different. You know, some authorities very much have not just a road safety team, but an active travel team. So again, I think it's going to be mixed. Would be my view on that.
Excellent, thanks. And just a reminder, if if you've got a question, please kind of pop it into the chat function. It'd be really useful if you could possibly say put the name of who you want your kind of question to be aimed at, or kind of which organisation. I can see if people have raised their hands, but kind of in the interest of time and just kind of ease, we will just sort of stick to questions in the chat, and we'll try and take as many as we can. If there are any questions that haven't been answered by the end of the session, and you kind of really want to be answered, then I will be sending out a follow-up email, which will include a lot of the links we've had in today's presentation. And please respond, and we can try and facilitate answers. Awesome. So I'm going to take the first question, which is aimed at sort of the guys at Dorset, Joe and Rob. Says the last example mentions one-way system for the footway. So do you have any pictures of that scheme?
I can get pictures of the scheme. I haven't got them to my hands right now, but my contact details are on Road Safety GB. So if you want some pictures and you want to know a bit more about that, absolutely drop me an email and I'll be happy to send them to you.
Excellent, thank you. And this question is a bit broad, and again, I'm not sure if anyone will quite know the answer, but we're just going to sort of take them in sort of chronological order. I've got them. It says, do these kind of guidelines align with Active Travel England policy and guidance? James, you might have the answer to that one.
Yeah, I've certainly had contact with Active Travel England, and I know there's great interest in the things like trailways, public rights of way, and we've got to remember that public rights of way also cover tarmacked areas as well, and trying to link. So yeah, there has been discussions, certainly open-minded about further discussions there, but broadly we will align. The whole thing with walk routes to school is really trying to, where it's available, trying to encourage that. Again, there's a benefit for local authorities in terms of reducing the amount of vehicles at the school gate. So there's definite benefit in terms of that aspect as well as other reasons.
Excellent. Thank you. Thank you very much, James. I'm going to pick up the next question, which I think is kind of aimed at Joe and Rob again. It says, but if anyone else has any thoughts, please also jump in. It says, how do you deal with new developments where transport would need to be provided due to an issue along the route outside the area of the new development? And there's a sort of follow-up question to that, which says, also, do you ask for any Section 106 funding from developers when they're above the distance required?
It would depend on the distance from the development. We might be able to work with our developer team that deal with the developers directly, and we might ask for Section 106 monies if it's something that's appropriate. We would need to review depending on what it was. But if it was, say, much further away or it wouldn't be appropriate, then we would maybe look at invest to save. I mean, if we were talking about spending, a few £1,000s and saving £50,000 a year, then clearly that's a good invest to save opportunity. So it just sort of depends on the things, but it would be a possibility that we would ask the developer. The example I gave in about the 5 meters of path, we would have been happy to pay for that and get that done, but actually the developer was still on site, still working, and they were quite happy to say, oh no, that really makes sense, we'll do that. So it just depends on the circumstances.
I think, Joe, this is the benefits of the working group, is that we've got so many people around the table that we can pull on, and there's always an answer normally.
Excellent. We've got quite a few more questions starting to pop through, so I'm going to kind of try and take them in a reasonably quick fire manner. And again, a lot of these are aimed at you wonderful guys at Dorset, so I'm going to keep you on the spot here. What's the longest route to school that Dorset has declared safe and transport provision has been withdrawn?
Withdrawn. Okay. Probably the example that I gave, which was 2.7 miles. 2.75. It was. I think
right to the back end of Charlton Marshall was almost 3 miles. There might have been 1 or 2 properties just over the 3 miles, I think. But yeah, that's probably the longest one. I mean, if you look at the example you gave with Chalminster Farm, again, we were looking at, that was right on that 3 mile, which is why we're quite keen to get our colleagues to get these planning applications, particularly with big developments, to us early on, so we can look at those, particularly if they are just under the distance, because they're likely to appeal more on distance than they are anything, but they'll try on safety ground. So if, like Joe said, a little central refuge somewhere on the route or something like that could actually tip the balance in the terms of doing our survey.
Excellent. I'm going to follow that straight up with another question saying, and I guess this relates to probably other more rural areas in particular, but in Dorset, do you have any issue with lighting in winter on off-road routes? Or does it get dark late enough that it's not an issue even in winter?
It's within the guidance, and this would be something that obviously the training would pick up as well, but actually personal safety is not a consideration of the walk route assessment. It's an available route accompanied as necessary. So it's the parents' responsibility. So personal safety and street lighting is not a consideration of the walk route assessment.
Excellent. I'm going to give you guys a break, and I've got a question for Jess and the TMS guys, if that's okay. It says, I imagine you can arrange training to be delivered within local areas. Is there a cost or minimum number of attendees required for this?
So yeah, we run face-to-face courses, then we also run what we call in-house courses, which is where we typically go to one local authority or a company, or sometimes they might join up. But I think probably the easiest way for us to manage that is to sort of to drop us an email, because then if we get a collection of ideas of like where regionally people are interested, then we can try and group those and plan those in at time and dates that would suit you. I think typically you'd probably be looking at like a minimum number of like 5 people being interested in the course to make it work. But if you drop us an email, then we can definitely provide that detail.
Excellent. Thank you, Jess. And I'm aware the time has kind of just ticked on to 10:45. We have a couple of unanswered questions in the chat, so I'm going to quickly take those, but I'm going to draw a line there. So any more questions that come in, we perhaps won't pick up. But again, if you've got a burning desire to have them answered, please do reach out and we will try and facilitate that. So the first of which reads, in Surrey, we're reviewing hundreds of routes, saving over 500,000 so far. The problems encountered are those involving personal safety. Any tips on how we can get across that this doesn't look that's kind of not, I guess, the kind of point. Many final decisions are political and not evidence-based. Anyone got any thoughts on that?
I don't mind picking that one up as well, because we had exactly the same problem. We would do the similar things, and then councillors would maybe overrule us. It can be quite an emotive subject. You can have parents that turn up and get quite upset, and it can be difficult. But what we did was training sessions for our members. We got all the members together, we sat them down, we produced like today, a training session, and went through the national guidelines bit by bit, made them understand and how important it was, and the consistency that, if you say yes to this one, that we can't justify saying no to another one, because that the roll-on effect could be really difficult for the transport. So maybe if you're in a position that you can work with, we worked with our democratic services to put on those training sessions for the councillors.
Excellent. Okay, penultimate question. How do you deal with the routes with multiple crossings that need to be assessed in the morning, afternoon, and again at times with the heaviest traffic flow? This can be very time consuming, having to undertake each crossing assessment during the school peaks.
Yeah, it might mean more than one visit, unfortunately. And what I have done certainly for gap analysis is we don't actually do the gap analysis manually anymore. We put a radar up. Radars collect the data vehicle by vehicle, so you get per vehicle records. We load them into a spreadsheet, and it automatically gives us a gap analysis. So it might be that we stick if you've got multiple, we might stick 2 or 3 radars up early morning, and maybe only stick them up for a couple of hours. Or, traditionally radars are up for a week or 2. We might only leave them up for a couple of hours, get them back down, run that through the software, and do it like that.
Excellent, great. And I'm just going to run on to the final question, which we're going to take in this session, which reads, livestock can be a highly variable factor. There at certain times of the year, not at others, or absent for years as field use changes, etc., etc. What factors do you think the assessment should take into account in kind of within that kind of sort of sphere?
Well, for us, we recently approved a route that had cows in it. It was a very short distance across the field. They didn't seem to present a danger. It was a well-trodden route, and I think the cows were used to seeing people in the field. You have to make that decision what feels right when you get there. Use that professional judgment. We have ones where we've walked out and we've said to ourselves, this doesn't feel right. It doesn't feel like it would be right to ask someone to walk across this field. It's a big, long distance, and there's lots of livestock in here. But it's also worth considering that how often is that livestock in that field, if you can find that out. Because one of the things that we learned along the way in working with the national guidelines and discussing with colleagues was a route being unavailable on 1 or 2 days doesn't mean that route is an unavailable route. It just means on that particular day it was unavailable.
Yeah, thanks, Joe. Yeah, it is a tricky one. I mean, just on that one, as far as the training is concerned, I've done a little bit of work on that, looking around other inputs other than road safety. The livestock in fields can be an issue, and it's not unheard of for people to be injured in these situations. So there's a bit of information on that in the course. There are situations where livestock can be more dangerous or perceived to be more dangerous. For example, if cows have calves with them, if anybody's walking through a field when they've got a dog with them, these make a difference, apparently. There's advice given from various bodies about how to negotiate a field when there's livestock in it. It's not just cows, it's horses as well. So there is a small section on the course that deals with this to an extent. But as Joe says, at the end of the day, it's going to be professional judgment. And the other thing, of course, is that, and again, as Joe's mentioned, you won't necessarily get what you see on that day on another day 3 months later. It's a tricky one.
Yeah, excellent. That's a nice way to round off the session. James, before I kind of close, I don't know if there's anything you want to quickly add from an RSGB perspective.
I've just popped into the chat there. So the contact details for the working group. So it's on the help and advice section. Click on the name, and then that will get you to the email. And also a fresh link there for the RSGB Academy, where you'll find the TMS consultancy course on the top right section there. So thank you, Ed.
Yeah.
Sorry, James, just to interrupt. There's been a few small inputs on access to templates. So just to say something on that, having had an offline conversation with Jess, we'll have a look at that and we'll make a decision about how we can make a template accessible, either to those who've been on previous courses where there weren't templates, or people who are interested in looking at them. Leave that one with us for now.
Okay, excellent. Thank you. Well, yeah, we're going to wrap up the session now. Thank you. I hope everyone's okay with that. We ran over by a few minutes. It's been a great session, and so much has been kind of said and learned and kind of discussed, which is fantastic. I want to say thank you to James, to Jess, to Steve, to Rob, and to Joe for their input, both in terms of the presentation and also the Q&A. And thank you for your time this morning. I want to say a massive thank you to everyone who attended. I clocked the highest number I clocked was 227 attendees, which is absolutely astonishing, really.
Wow.
So thank you. And again, just to reiterate, I know I've said this a few times, that we have recorded the session. I will aim to kind of get that edited and uploaded by this afternoon, at which point I'll send out the link, along with some other links for kind of the key things discussed. If you have any questions or feedback, obviously, please let me know. And likewise, if you have any questions, please send them across, and I will look to kind of facilitate those answers for you. So yeah, all this definitely says you have a great day. The sun is shining here, so I hope it is for you too. And we look forward to catching up soon.
Thank you very much.
everyone.
Cheers.
Thank you.